The Lavender Odyssey, Chapter 3, A Taste of Honey, by John W. Lavender. Starting a new life together brought its challenges. Moving into Cambridge Street, for example. Anne took over the operation. She ordered her helpers to take up their positions. But when it came to large objects like the sofa, her orders were more bravado than know-how. I had to step in several times to offset pending damage to the premises. The three kids were to share one bedroom, and Micah-el and I moved into what had been my bachelor pad. A single bed is spacious enough for newlyweds. As we were busy sorting out our load, we had an unexpected visitor. The ominous figure of a man in a dark suit arrived on the doorstep. He said he was RCMP and was investigating the abduction of a child. Micah-el produced Barnaby's custody papers and their official entry into Canada. The inspector was satisfied that everything was in order. We asked him what had initiated the investigation. He said his office had received a complaint. The source was obviously wrong. We took the three kids with us on our 3-day honeymoon at Lac-Beauport, near Quebec City. As it was a retreat, the kids had a separate room together. Being farther north, even in late June, we were still following a trail of budding trees and still flowing in a bliss that was both physical and spiritual. Micah-el wanted to celebrate our marriage with their friends in Canada, and we organized an event in the Ottawa Arboretum. The Arboretum is located inside the experimental farm in the green belt of Ottawa. It was an ideal place for our celebration. We invited the TM community and a few of my old acquaintances from Montreal. One of the guests was Mrs. Gower, who had been my next-door neighbor in England when I was growing up. She and her family had emigrated to Canada many years before, and she was working at Carleton University. The celebration at the Arboretum was a lovely event, and we dressed for the part, wearing our wedding apparel. Chamber music played during our promenade, and Micah-el looked like the Queen of the May, with a daisy-chain tiara that I made for her. I learned that my wife had a talent for making special occasions memorable. Establishing ourselves in the community took several months. First, we moved into an apartment on Gladstone Street, and while Christopher grew inside Micah-el's belly, we continued to work at the TM headquarters. We discussed the possibility of putting down a deposit on a house and found a partly finished chalet in the Gatineau Hills, 40 kilometers north of Ottawa. The chalet had 3 bedrooms, a combined living room, kitchen, and a back porch. The previous owner said there was a functioning well, but this turned out to be a falsehood. The property was on the side of a hill with a steep driveway to the chalet. It was nicely surrounded by wooded hills, and there was a spring on the side of the road nearby, and we used buckets of water to flush the toilet. We called the hill facing the chalet Lavender Mountain. A memoir might well be filled with cute anecdotes, but I want to reminisce the high spots. Christopher's birth and how his christening coincided with Ianna's confirmation. According to my calculation, Christopher had been conceived while we were on our honeymoon in Lac-Beauport. But let's start with going to see the doctor for one of Micah-el's scheduled prenatal checkups. The drive to Hull, which is on the opposite side of the Ottawa River, sticks in my memory because Micah-el complained every time we hit a pothole in the road, and there were many. We were only in the doctor's office a few minutes before charging off to Hôpital Sacré-Cœur. As we entered the foyer of the hospital, Micah-el went into raptures about a mosaic of Jesus. She was already transitioning. I had my permissions list with me that Micah-el had worked out with the doctor. It was my job to enforce the law, so to speak. It was clear the nurses did not like outside interference, and natural childbirth was not their preference. No, 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 I said, waving my fingers. No drugs. I produced my list of do's and do-nots and gave it to the nurse with the least furrowed brow. She smiled and acknowledged my role in the birthing process. Before I knew it, I was led into the delivery room, wearing an apron and putting on surgical gloves. I noticed we had a few spectators in the balcony, interns. My job was coming up fast. The delivery happened almost instantly and without any complications. I cut the umbilical cord, and our baby boy never made a sound. The doctor slapped him, and Micah-el swore that his first word was agony, which is the first word from the Rig Veda. How blood got on my hand, I'm not sure, but I didn't wash it off for a whole week. The day of Christopher's birth was supposed to be Ianna's confirmation day, but that got postponed for another month. Micah-el released herself from hospital an hour after giving birth. In all things to do with family life, she was the experienced one, and I was the novice. She had brought up 4 children, mostly on her own, and now there was a 5th. I was determined to do my part. Christopher's christening and Ianna's confirmation took place at the Catholic school that Ianna attended in Hull. Designating appropriate godparents had already been arranged. We had discussed who we would like them to be. One was Murray Hunter, who we thought was in Switzerland, but mysteriously turned up just before the christening. He was an ideal candidate to be Christopher's godfather. Murray's christening gift was a rosary that he had brought from the monastery in Einsiedeln, Switzerland. It was a monastery famous for its Black Madonna. The monastery was meaningful to Micah-el as well, because while visiting there, she felt the presence of a soul wanting to be born. Neither of us were Catholic, but it somehow felt right to have a Catholic blessing. All the arrangements for the christening and confirmation had been organized by the school, but what we did not know was to what extent. The first thing that indicated the christening and confirmation would be no ordinary event were the posters pinned on the walls. Welcome, baby Chris. It seemed the whole school had turned out for it. The priest performed the christening by lifting Christopher high in the air and then dipping him into the baptismal font. It was a beautiful experience, except the priest stumbled over Christopher's name. He was supposed to say, I baptize you J. Christopher Ram, and instead he said, I baptize you J. Christopher Ron. Ram being the Hindu name for God, but Ron, I don't know. Nevertheless, both Ianna and Christopher had been sealed in accordance with the Roman rite.